Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Jay Lee Day, so we're taking a look at the next issue of the original HELLSHOCK miniseries, issue number 3, cover dated October 1994. Did not read this originally back in the day. I mentioned before in past reviews that I, basically got HELLSHOCK issue 1 and 2 and kind of lost interest. Now I've gone through issue 3 for the first time for this review, and I'm kind of glad that back then I dropped that title, because as much as I love Jay Lee's artwork, it's changing a little bit in here, and there's just not that same excitement factor as opposed to the stuff he was doing on Youngblood Strike File, even Wildcats Trilogy, and the stuff he was doing at Marvel as well on Namor. All that stuff is just more exciting to me than this. There's kind of a transition period art-wise between that stuff and what he would do later on say, Inhumans, and I'm a fan of the Inhumans stuff and the aesthetic. His modern stuff, I'm a fan of his original, right into the industry stuff that he was doing for Image. This period here in between, just not much of a fan of, honestly. And the vibe of this book, the kind of Vertigo look and aesthetic that he's doing on the cover here, you could almost assume that just the colorist did this. I don't think Jay Lee had any hand in this cover, although I could be wrong. His name's on it though. I will say this, they've made the title a lot easier to read, but once again, there's just nothing really interesting here. No type of no trace of Image aesthetic at all in this cover. Like I said, more of a Vertigo, however you want to say it. And it was just not something I was interested in when I was 11 or 12. And to be honest, even today, not that interested in this kind of stuff. So there you go. Kind of a rip-off of Dave McKean stuff, really, on this cover. This will be a pretty quick review because, man, the story once again is moving at a snail's pace. Just not much going on, and it's taken 3 issues to basically introduce the concepts that we're going to see here that I feel could have probably been in the first, maybe the second issue, and we could have been a lot further on with some of the conflict and some of the action, because again, with this issue, you'll see very little action has happened over the course of 3 issues. So art by Jay Lee, story by Jay Lee and Jose Villarrubia. Jose Villarrubia doing the computer colors and most of the heavy lifting, I think, on the backgrounds. I'm going to assume, and I've talked before about how I feel like some of these backgrounds are pictures that are played around with the contrast in Photoshop. So I feel like these two are definitely examples of that. And then anything where there's no background elements and just mostly color, I feel like the colors is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. David Lark's, colors, Jose Villarrubia, computer colors, David Lark's, cover by Jose Villarrubia. So I was right on that. Cover logo by David Lark's, lettering, Richard Starkings, and Comic Craft. So once again, we're with this young lady who I assumed was being hounded, the disembodied voice that we got here. Last few issues I mentioned, I assumed he was a demon, but in this one we find out that basically he is not a demon, but actually a fallen angel. So as you can see, he's got holes in his back here where his wings used to be, right? Obviously, with the aesthetic he's given him and the evil kind of look that he's got, you'd be hard-pressed with what you know of Christianity to assume he's an angel. It was a lot easier to assume he was a demon, so there you go. This page is pretty cool with all the broken glass and stuff. I think it looks great. What we get from Jay Lee that's in line with what he was doing before is those huge black spaces, dark shadows. But he's really toned down the anatomy a lot of his male characters, right? They're still very muscular and lean and stuff, and vascular, I guess is how you could describe it when you see all the sinew and the muscles and stuff. But he's definitely toned down the exaggerated proportions, as we'll see throughout this book. This is a pretty cool shot here. But some of the coloring sometimes I find kind of ruins some of the art here. So there's these little bits of fire on, on top of the blacks. Doesn't work quite as well as when it's just left alone in shadow and just the regular, white medium that Jay Lee uses here on the eyes. And you can see here that I've talked about before, right? So we've got 3 stories going on. Basically, the lady and the angel are HELLSHOCK's parents. So here, if you remember last issue, HELLSHOCK was kind of picked up by an angel, and she's just basically, throughout this book, is describing or explaining to HELLSHOCK that he is the son of an angel and a human, right? So that's basically all we get from HELLSHOCK in this issue. There's other parts, but still that's the driving kind of plot point. Great silhouette, though, once again, right, from Jay Lee. This kind of stuff always works really well. We're reintroduced to the cop character from the first issue. We saw a little bit of him in second issue, discussing, HELLSHOCK, basically. And here's another example of where, there's kind of a disconnect in this mid-period of his art, I find. where we're getting the old school kind of Jay Lee face and the angular look, and that's a pretty typical face that you'd see in Youngblood Strikebound stuff. But then the anatomy has been toned down a lot, and it almost looks now like it's the opposite, where the body's a little too small and the head's a little too big. Just not a great shot of this police character here, I think. You know, when he does stuff like this, I find it's more successful than some of the other shots on this page here. 4 stories, excuse me, with this kid, Josh, right? Still being led around by a doppelganger or a clone or a twin. We still don't know yet what exactly is going on, and it's been happening since issue 1. So like I said, the story rolls out at such a slow pace that's basically what makes it non-interesting to me. As cool as some of the art is, it's just the story doesn't keep me interested. A little bit of a typo here, which I thought was, you know, that's an unfortunate mistake. Marriage is IA, not GE, so that's kind of a big mistake, really. Someone should have picked up on that. So we get the story of the mother going to the police, obviously with the story of a demon or angel that's communicating with her, and she can see the hellfire behind them, but they can't, right? So obviously that old trope of they think she's crazy and she's hearing voices and stuff. Here the police officer talking with the lab geek at the police department, talking about how we found this embedded in the altar, excuse me, it came from your gun. You're saying I missed? No, I'm not. So when he shot HELLSHOCK, the bullet went clean through his head and lodged into the altar. And then they talk about the blood sample where there was just a little drop, but now the little drop has kind of multiplied inside the vial. Hey, and what, you know, as the cop says, you're saying this thing isn't human. And the lab geek says, not even remotely. I do feel too like the art as we move throughout this issue starts to drop off a little bit. I do feel like Jay Lee is, maybe he's starting to get bored with the story, not interested. I don't know, but I do feel like the art is falling off a little bit as we get towards the end of the issue. And again, you know, the lack of backgrounds and stuff just more and more pronounced all throughout, and letting the computer coloring do most of the heavy lifting. Like something like this, not a bad drawing per se, but there's just something about it that's a little stiff and feels like it was drawn very quickly, and probably could have been a lot better and spent a little more time on it, you know, maybe using more of the white medium and making that shot a little more interesting. It's just pretty generic, right? This angel character, not much specific about his design to differentiate him from other characters. Pretty cool looking splash page, but again, lacking backgrounds. And I guess this is the point where, you know, HELLSHOCK just really fully realizes that he's half human and half angel. His mother goes to the church where he was discovered, and of course is contacted by the angel here. It feels like story-wise we're jumping past and present, through the past and the present with HELLSHOCK's mother, and it's confusing as to when we are exactly. So again, not the most fleshed out and easily followable story. And again, another example of, I feel like this was done pretty quickly, and just no background elements. It feels like he's losing interest basically as we go through. And then we get our first real kind of shot of HELLSHOCK, where he's developed for some reason his you know, cross-like logo on his face here. And as soon as they do, or as soon as Jay Lee does introduce the look in the book, I feel like the face changes. He doesn't look like the same character anymore. And it's just kind of odd. Consistency be damned, right? Here's where we find out the name of the angel here, Jonakand. I'm not sure how you're supposed to say that. And, you know, you think at an angle like this, it'd be important to kind of highlight that hole in his back, right? From the wings, the loss of wings. I mean, I'm assuming that's what it is because they don't actually say it. But visually, when you see that first shot of the hole in his back, you have to assume that's what it is. Why is the angel in hellfire, though? Is he now a demon because he copulated with a human? Not a lot is explained here. And that's what I mean. A lot of kind of fun, interesting, mystical images, but not a lot of story to support what's going on and let us know what's going on. So Jonakand, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, finally reunited with HELLSHOCK's mother here. And again, this is what I mean is, you know, who is this guy? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? I guess we're going to find out at some point, but not in this issue, unfortunately. And I mean, you know, if there is any good in him or some, you know, redeemable personality trait, we're certainly not getting it in the visuals, right? He definitely looks more like a demon than an angel. And that's fine, but there's just not, the story's not explaining what's going on enough for me to care, basically. So here we go. HELLSHOCK finally enters. Stand away from her, Jonathan. And who are you to speak to me this way? Who are you to deny me that which is mine? You can call me HELLSHOCK. We have to talk, father. Anytime a character just says, you can call me this, you can call me that, just that tired old comic book trope where people just come in and introduce themselves. You probably could have done something better here. The last page is just a splash of HELLSHOCK's face. I mean, the story is really just, paper thin and just not much going on. And again, we're 3 issues in and there's been no actual conflict. It's finally been set up here to a certain extent. I guess we're gonna, in issue 4, have some sort of battle or conflict between HELLSHOCK and his father, Jonathan. But we're gonna have to wait till issue 4 to find out. And to have gone through 3 issues up to this point and just gotten so little story, so little background, just shows you sometimes, like those Image guys, those artists becoming writers. Some of them, it went really well. I think with someone like Eric Larson, Todd McFarlane was all right. Pitt had its moments, even though it was written by the artist. Jay Lee I don't think was ever meant to be a writer, or maybe really needs to work on his writing. And that kind of plays out throughout his career, because after HELLSHOCK, I don't think he wrote anything else himself. After that, it was all collaborations with much better writers. That's why something like the Inhumans miniseries he did, I think, is great, because you got Paul Jenkins writing, who's a pretty solid writer and does some good stuff. So yeah, it just, sometimes those artists writing their own stuff just doesn't really work out. We got some cool fan art. I mean, not sure how great this one is here. The fact that we've not ever seen really HELLSHOCK's full complete design yet, means that people are kind of guessing at it or just drawing the elements that we have seen. Is he naked when he's HELLSHOCK? I honestly don't know. I feel like this artist just assumed he was, and maybe we'll find out next issue. Hopefully in issue 4, some of those questions are answered. But yeah, up to now, I got to say, not the best Image miniseries out there for sure. In Your Face, Liefeld, Mickey Stevenson, Youngblood every month from Extreme Studios and Image Comics. This is probably when he did his comeback. And I mean, still some pretty cool looking stuff, some great, dynamic, foreshortened characters, but there's just something about it when Liefeld's not inking himself that is just not as evocative to me. Mickey's a great inker, don't get me wrong, probably the best inker on Rob Liefeld other than himself. But there's a little bit of that roughness and energy that's lost with the slightly finer lines that Mickey's laying down. Mickey, I think, will really, his talents will show most later on Spawn, when he's inking Greg Capullo. Not when he's sharing the load with McFarlane. When he fully takes over the book, McFarlane's not inking anymore. That's where Danny Mickey, I think, really shines art-wise on top of Greg Capullo. I think that's a very good combination. Probably better than Liefeld and Mickey. Not probably, in my mind. Most assuredly. Spawn 26 description. None of this. There was a period of Spawn where the ads really didn't relate to what was actually going to happen in the issue, or happened in the issue when you got it. There's a moment there where Todd's coming off the title as the artist. He's setting up Todd Toys. So I feel like he's doing a lot of stuff at the last minute. And sometimes the adverts really don't connect to what's actually happening storyline wise in the book. I'd have to go at some point. I'll review Spawn number 26, but I know that it's not what the description says here. Deadly Duo by Andy Smith, basically a Bart Sears clone, right? Those guys work together a lot, and probably in the same studio. And I don't know, I think I've talked about this ad before, right? Peter David and John Byrne had absolutely nothing to do with this comic. I don't like this idea of putting other creators' names that have nothing to do with the book to kind of catch your attention or something, or be snarky and funny. Not sure that's the best marketing strategy there. All right, there you go, guys. That is my somewhat negative review of HELLSHOCK number 3, but what are you going to do? That's the way the cookie crumbles on this one. If you're still watching and you are subscribed, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, or haven't liked the video, please do so below. It really helps us out, helps the channel grow, helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. So thank you once again for watching, guys. Have yourselves an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.